Let's jump right in. Today, we're diving into an explainer on one of the most thoroughly documented and, frankly, medically baffling UFO cases in history, the Falcon Lake incident. We're going to put aside all the wild speculation and focus purely on the undeniable, hard physical evidence. Because you see, this isn't just your typical story about weird lights in the night sky. This is the story of a man who got entirely too close, reached out, and carried the literal physical scars of that one decision for the rest of his life.
We're starting right in the middle of the terrifying aftermath. Picture this. It's May 1967. Out of a remote Canadian forest, a man stumbles onto a highway. His shirt is completely burned off. His chest is raw, and every few steps he has to stop and vomit. He manages to flag down a passing police car. But as the officer gets out to help, the man throws up a hand and screams, "Don't come closer. My body is radioactive." He tells the cop that something incredibly bright had come down from the sky and burned him. Well, completely unsettled by this screaming, bleeding guy, the officer actually gets back in his cruiser and just drives away. Nobody believed him that day. Section 1. The Man from the Woods. Let's look at the immediate aftermath. What you have to realize is that these aren't just tall tales or blurry, out-of-focus photographs. We are talking about documented severe medical trauma. When this man finally made it to a hospital, doctors found this bizarre, grid-like pattern burned deep into his chest. And here's the absolute wildest part. That burn mark didn't just heal and go away. For the next 30 years, it kept coming back. It would painfully reappear every few months, entirely on its own. This undeniable physical reality is exactly what launched a massive 30-year, 300-page government investigation involving dozens of top doctors and 2 national air forces. Section 2. A Grounded Witness. Let's establish some historical context. I want you to notice the 20-year gap here. Back on June 24, 1947, a businessman named Kenneth Arnold saw 9 shining objects skipping over Mount Rainier. That birthed the term flying saucer and kicked off an absolute global craze. So for 20 whole years, the world had been obsessively watching the sky, wondering if we were alone. Then jump forward to May 19, 1967. Our witness, Stefan Michalak, checks into a small motel near Falcon Lake in Canada, getting ready to head deep into the massive whiteshell forest the very next morning. So who exactly was Stefan Michalak? Well, he was a 51-year-old mechanic living in Winnipeg. The guy knew machines inside and out, and he really understood metal. But more importantly, he was a survivor of a World War II Nazi camp. He had literally looked death in the eye and lived to tell the tale. The crucial takeaway here is that Stefan was incredibly grounded and observant. A guy who survives that level of historical terror, he doesn't panic easily. He was out in the woods that weekend doing what he genuinely loved, cracking open rocks, prospecting for silver. He wasn't out there hunting for aliens, he was hunting for quartz veins. Moving to Section 3, the landing and the burn. Let's break down the encounter itself. The morning of the 20th was totally peaceful, just the rhythmic tap of Stefan's prospecting hammer. Then, at exactly 12:15 p.m., every single bird on the nearby lake suddenly shrieked and scattered. Stefan looked up and saw 2 glowing red, cigar-shaped objects dropping from the sky. As they descended, they seemed to flatten out into discs. One paused, hovered for a second, and then shot straight back up. But the second one kept coming down, eventually landing right on the open bedrock just 50 steps away from him. And what did Stefan do? He didn't run away. He ducked behind a boulder, pulled out some paper and a pencil, and just started sketching the craft. He sat there for half an hour, observing it exactly like a mechanic diagnosing a piece of heavy machinery. Now, what investigators found so incredibly compelling about his account was the sensory detail. As Stefan watched this object, he noticed its glowing red color slowly fade to orange and then eventually settle into a dull iron-like gray. As a lifelong metalworker, Stefan knew that is exactly how intensely hot metal cools in the real world. Red, then orange, then gray. He was literally watching the laws of thermodynamics play out right in front of him in the middle of a Canadian forest. Driven by pure curiosity, he eventually stepped out and approached it. And this just perfectly highlights his grounded mindset. He noted the craft had no landing gear, no wheels, and a totally seamless, polished hull without a single rivet or joint. It was giving off this eerie, low hum that he could actually feel vibrating in his chest. Then, a panel opened up, pouring out this intense, purplish light. Stefan actually strapped on his welding goggles to protect his eyes and peered inside, seeing flashing panels. Because he was such a practical guy, he naturally assumed it was just a secret, experimental human aircraft that had been forced to land for repairs. He literally called out for help in English, Russian, German, Italian, French, and Ukrainian, all languages he had picked up surviving the war. But crickets. No response came. Suddenly, that low hum ramped up into a deep rumble, sounding almost like a heavy engine starting, and the craft began glowing red again. The air around him turned oven hot. Stefan, who was wearing thick industrial gloves, made the fateful decision to reach out and touch the hull, and that triggered a terrifying mechanical reaction. The second he touched the seamless metal, his rubber glove instantly melted and fused to his skin with a vicious hiss. Without warning, the open door slammed shut, the entire object began spinning rapidly, and a row of grid-like holes on the side blasted his chest with scorching, toxic air. His clothes literally caught on fire. He had to violently tear his shirt off and beat out the flames with his bare hands just as a massive gust of wind rushed past him, and the craft vanished into the sky.
Section 4. A body of evidence. Let's pivot to the cold, hard medical aftermath.
10. That's a crucial number here. Stefan miraculously managed to crawl his way out of the woods and get back home, but his 9-year-old son was absolutely terrified. And it wasn't just because of the gruesome burns. There was this bizarre, awful odor radiating directly from Stefan's skin. Once he was admitted to the hospital, over the course of just the following week, Stefan lost 10 kilograms of body weight. He was suffering from splitting headaches, severe nausea, and sudden fainting spells. But here is the stark medical reality that truly baffled the doctors. His blood work revealed a total white blood cell collapse. His immune cells plummeted to dangerously low levels. In the medical world, this is a classic, undeniable indicator of extreme radiation exposure. It was so severe that an American doctor specializing in radiation treatment was actually brought in just to examine him. That specialist's conclusion was chilling. Stefan had absorbed so much radiation that if he had stayed near that object even a few seconds longer, he absolutely would have died. Investigators were just totally stunned by the mountain of physical evidence. On the human side of things, doctors across both Canada and the US watched in disbelief as Stefan's grid-like burns would heal, only to painfully blister and reappear in the exact same spot roughly every 4 months, right on schedule. And then, on the environmental side, a highly skeptical Canadian Air Force officer actually trekked out to the site and found a massive scorched circle on the bedrock. When they tested the soil samples, they came back laced with radium, a highly radioactive element. In concentrations so high, the lab actually flagged the site as hazardous. To make things even weirder, almost exactly a year later, Stefan went back to the site and found 2 heavily radioactive silver rods hidden inside a rock crevice. The sheer volume of this physical and environmental evidence eventually culminated in a massive 300-page classified Canadian government file. The very fact that local police, 2 national air forces, and top-tier doctors were so heavily involved proves that authorities treated this not as a joke or a hoax, but as a highly credible, hazardous, and deeply unexplainable event. In fact, the lead investigating officer officially went on the record acknowledging he simply could not explain Stefan's illness, the recurring burns, or the scorched radioactive rock. Finally, Section 5, the unsolved legacy. What do we make of all this? You see, Stefan Michalak was nothing like your typical UFO hoaxer. A typical charlatan aggressively seeks out the spotlight, sells a bunch of books, and constantly shifts their story to keep people's attention. Stefan did absolutely none of that. He paid for his own extensive medical treatments completely out of pocket. He never wrote a book. When he went to his grave in 1999, at the age of 83, he was still maintaining the exact same objective, grounded account he gave on day 1. And perhaps the most telling detail of all, Stefan never once insisted that aliens were real. He only ever said one thing. He saw a strange craft, he touched it, and its radiation made him incredibly sick. And here is a truly fascinating twist of fate to wrap things up. In 2018, exactly 50 years after the incident, the very same Canadian government that originally classified his massive case file actually minted a special commemorative coin to mark the event. And fittingly enough, it's a glow-in-the-dark silver coin. Think about that. A humble man who walked into the remote woods looking for silver quartz veins ended up half a century later immortalized on a silver coin of his own, forever validating his place in Canadian history. We'll end this explainer on a profound thought. What do we believe? To this day, skeptics have never been able to explain away the actual, documented radiation burns or the radioactive soil, while believers, of course, point to this as definitive, slam-dunk proof of the otherworldly. But regardless of where that seamless, humming craft actually came from, the real takeaway here is about how we treat people. Stefan didn't want fame. He just wanted a doctor to name his illness and treat his excruciating pain. So when someone comes to us with an impossible story bearing real, visible scars, choosing to empathetically believe the person standing in front of us in genuine pain is often the most human thing we can possibly do. I'll leave you with this. What would you have done if you were that police officer on the highway?